Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Srila Gurudev ki jai. Nitil Pravishta Vishnupad Ashitara Shatashmad Srila Bhaktivedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitil Pravishta Vishnupad Ashitara Shatashmad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitil Pravishta Vishnupad Ashitara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nitil Pravishta Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Nitil Pravishta Mahabhagavat Srila Bhaksharas Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nitil Pravishta Vaishnavas, no, Nitil Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nitil Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Patadash Raghunath Shah की जाए. श्री स्वरूप दामोदर राय रामानंदारी श्री गोपाल शारदा वृंद की जाए. नाम अचाय श्री रस ठाकुर की जाए. प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जाए. श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल ब्रज मंडल मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जाए. सर्व अभिष्ट प्रदाता गिरिराज महाराज की जाए. श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड की जाए. श्री मुनि देवी गंगा देवी की जाए. श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जाए. श्री भक्ति देवी की जय. श्री पूर्णमासी योगमाया की जय. श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जय. श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय. अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय. समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय. श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल. Dandavad pranams, auntie and uncle, Bhavatarani Mataji and Nri Hari Prabhu, Dandavad pranams. Indira Mataji, Pradyumna Prabhu is finally back, and Mantaramurthy Mataji, Rup Manjari Didi, Indira Mataji, Raseshwari Mataji. Wow, everybody's here today. Gargaraj Prabhu, Dandavad pranams to all of you. Hari Bol. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namine. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo mahavadanyaya Krishna prema pradayate Krishnaya Krishna chaitanya namne gauratishe namaha. Guruve gaurachandraya radhikaya itadalaya Krishnaya Krishna bhaktaya tarbhaktaya namo namaha. Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta Dvaipayano virahakatara ajuhava Putreti tanmayataya taravo binedu Stang sarvabhuta hridaya munimanatosmi Narayanam namaskritya narang chaiva narottamam Devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayet Shrinvatang swakata Krishna punya shavana kirtana Vedantasto yabhadrani vidhunoti suritsatam Nashta prayeshvapadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya Bhagavatyuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki Tavai vasmi na jivami tvaya vina Iti vigyaya radhe tvam nayamam charanantikam Bhaktya vihina aparada lakshay kshiptashtakama madhe Kripamai tvam sharanam prapanna vrinde namaste charana ravindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So now we're reading between Nārada and King Prācīnabarhi. Here's a recap of what we read yesterday. Well, actually, yesterday we read from the end of 64. Avigyata, who is the super soul, he says to Vidarbhi when she's... My screen's not getting clear. Anyways, this is what we ended with. Vigyata says to Vidarbhi, in this way, one swan, after being instructed by the other, regained his original Krishna consciousness, which was lost because of his aversion to the Lord. Thus I have given spiritual instructions indirectly through an allegory, since the Lord can be known indirectly. Or it can mean, or he is fond of indirect expression. The Lord is fond of indirect expression, huh? Likes everything not to be a little bit cryptic. Okay? So, now, oh God. Let me close this and open it again, because it is not clearing up. Just quit. Now, open again. Okay, there. So Prācīnabarhi said, okay, so finally we finished the allegorical story. Nārada finished telling the allegorical story to Prācīnabarhi, who is the father of the Prachetas. And you remember there's 10 Prachetas, and after meeting with Shiva, Shiva sings the Rudra Geet for them. Then after that they go to perform austerity for 10,000 years. And all the while they're performing austerities, Prācīnabarhi, he's engaging in fruitive sacrifices. He's engaging in all this karma. And so then Nārada comes to him and tells him this allegorical story. The story's finished now. Prācīnabarhi said, we couldn't completely understand the purport of your words due to our attachment to karma. But experts in spiritual knowledge can understand them. So now Nārada he breaks everything down, he makes it more clear. Now Nārada explains the different characters in the allegory. So the character Puranjan is compared to the living entity who transmigrates according to one's work into different bodies. And the city is compared to the body, with 1, 2, 3, or many or no legs. Bodies with, and so, body with 1 leg, right, was the ghosts. With 2 legs is human. 3 legs is when you become old and you need help from a cane. And then many legs, it seems like the more legs you get, the more often, the less, lower on the species it is. Then Avigyata is the Supreme Lord, eternal friend of the jiva. Since the jivas cannot realize the Lord by material names, activities, or qualities, he remains unknown. Oh, Avigyata means unknown. Yeah. Then the city of the 9 gates of the city is compared to the body with 9 openings and 2 hands. When the jiva wants to enjoy, he considers a human or demigod body to be the best. Then the character Puranjani is compared to material intelligence. or ignorance. And this material intelligence produces the concepts of I and mine, taking shelter of which the jiva enjoys the modes of material nature with his senses, entrapped in the body. Then her male friends, or is it Puranjan's male friends? I can't remember. Anyhow, the male friends are the 10 senses, instruments for enjoying the material world. The female friends are the actions of the senses, tasting, hearing, smelling, etc. And there's a footnote there. In chapter 25, verse 20, the female friends are compared to the unlimited desires of the senses. Okay, but here Narada's saying, okay. The serpent with 5 heads is the life air with 5 different functions, Pran, Apan, Udan, Vyan, and Saman. And the 11th attendant, the commander of the others, is the mind, leader of the 10 senses, both in the acquisition of knowledge and in the performance of work. The mind is the leader. The Panchal states are the 5 sense objects. Within this kingdom is the body, the city. Okay, now description of the 9 gates. And this is breaking down, Narada's breaking down what he explained in chapter 25, verses 45 to 55. Wait, actually no, we're reading from this point on. Okay, we read up to 16 last time. Okay, yeah, Rupanjari is saying they start off as our friends, yeah. Hey, we're not on chapter 28, we're on chapter 29. Okay, yeah, we didn't finish. We were supposed to read up to 16 yesterday, but didn't get that far. Antapuram cha hridayam vishuchir mana uchate tatra moham prasadam va harsham prapnoti targunai. The word Antapura refers to the heart. The word Vishuchina, meaning going everywhere, indicates the mind. Within the mind, the living entity enjoys the effects of the modes of material nature. These effects sometimes cause illusion, sometimes satisfaction, and sometimes jubilation. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The mind and intelligence of the living entity in material existence are affected by the modes of material nature. And according to the association of the material modes, the mind is habituated to go here and there. The heart feels satisfaction, jubilation, or illusion, according to the effects of the modes of material nature. Actually, the living entity in his material condition remains inert. It is the modes of material nature that act on the mind and heart. The results are enjoyed or suffered by the living entity. This is clearly stated in Bhagavad Gita 3.27. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. The bewildered spirit soul, under the influence of the 3 modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by nature. Yata yata vikriyate gunakto vikaroti va tata tato padrashtatma tarviritir anukaryate. Formally, it was explained that the queen is one's intelligence. While one is awake or asleep, that intelligence creates different situations. Being influenced by contaminated intelligence, the living entity envisions something and simply imitates the actions and reactions of his intelligence. Purport. The queen of Puranjan is described herein as intelligence itself. Intelligence acts both in the dream state and in the waking state, but it is contaminated by the three modes of material nature. Since the intelligence is contaminated, the living entity is also contaminated. In the conditioned state, the living entity acts according to his contaminated intelligence. Although he simply remains an observer, he nonetheless acts, being forced by a contaminated intelligence, which in reality is a passive agent. There's a couple lines missing. 1 second. Oh, but it isn't missing like this. Okay. Let's just zoom in then. Hey. Dehoratastundriyashva saṁsāra rayogati tui karma chakrastri guna dvaja panchasu bandura manorashmir buddhi suto hrinnido dvandakubara pachendriyartha prakshepa saptadhatu varutaka akutir vikramo bhayo mrigatrishnam pradhavati ekadashendriya chamu panchasuna vinodakrit. Narad Muni continued. It's not letting me scroll. What I referred to as the chariot was in actuality the body. The senses are the horses that pull that chariot. As time passes, year after year, these horses run without obstruction. But in fact, they make no progress. Pious and impious activities are the two wheels of the chariot. The three modes of material nature are the chariot's flags. The 5 types of life air constitute the living entity's bondage, and the mind is considered to be the rope. Intelligence is the chariot driver. The heart is the sitting place in the chariot, and the dualities of life, such as pleasure and pain. And the dualities of life, such as pleasure and pain, are the nodding place. Okay. The 7 elements are the coverings of the chariot, and the working senses are the 5 external processes. The 11 senses are the soldiers. Being engrossed in sense enjoyment, the living entity, seated on the chariot, hankers after fulfillment of his false desires, and runs after sense enjoyment, life after life. Purport. The entanglement of the living entity. 1 second. The entanglement of the living entity in sense enjoyment is very nicely explained in these verses. The word samvatsar, meaning the progress of time, is significant. Day after day, week after week, fortnight after fortnight, month after month, year after year, the living entity becomes entangled in the chariot's progress. The chariot rests on 2 wheels, which are pious and impious activities. The living entity attains a certain position in life in a particular type of body according to his pious and impious activities. But his transmigration into different bodies should not be taken as progress. Real progress is explained in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 9. Takta deham punarjanma naiti. One makes real progress when he does not have to take on another material body. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 19.138, Eto brahmanda bhori ananta jiva gan Chaurashi lakal yonite korae brahman. The living entity is wandering throughout the entire universe and taking birth in different species on different planets. Thus he moves up and down, but that is not real progress. Real progress is getting out of this material world altogether, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 8.16. Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartino juna mam upetya tu kaunteya punarjanma navidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Even if one is promoted to Brahmaloka, the highest planet in the universe, he has to come down again to the lower planetary systems. Thus he is wandering up and down perpetually under the influence of the three modes of material nature. Being illusioned, he thinks he is making progress. He is like an airplane encircling the earth day and night, incapable of leaving the earth's gravitational field. Factually, there is no progress because the airplane is conditioned by the earth's gravity. Just as a king is seated on a chariot, the living entity is seated in the body. The sitting place is the heart, and the living entity sits there and engages in the struggle for existence, which goes on without progress perpetually. And the words of Narottam Das Thakur, Karma kanda jnana kanda kevala vishera bhanda amrita boliya jebai bhukai nana yoni sada fire kadarya baksha na kore tar janmaya dha pate jai. The living entity struggles very hard due to the influence of fruitive activity and mental speculation, and simply gets a different type of body life after life. He eats all kinds of nonsense and is condemned by his activities of sense enjoyment. If one really wants to progress in life, he must give up the ways of karma kanda and gyan kanda, fruitive activities and mental speculation. Being fixed in Krishna consciousness, one can become free from the entanglement of birth and death and the vain struggle for existence. In these verses, the words mriga trishnam pradavati are very significant, because the living entity is influenced by a thirst for sense enjoyment. He is like a deer that goes to the desert to search out water. In a desert, an animal simply searches in vain for water. Of course, there is no water in the desert, and the animal simply sacrifices his life in an attempt to find it. Everyone is planning for future happiness, thinking that somehow or other he can reach a certain point. They think that somehow or other, if he can reach a certain point, he will be happy. In actuality, however, when he comes to that point, he sees that there is no happiness. He then plans to go further and further to another point. This is called mriga trishna, and its basis is sense enjoyment in this material world. Mriga means deer, and trishna means thirst. How do they translate it here, though? I'm just curious. False aspiration. Okay. Samvatsaraschanda vega kalayena palakshita tasyaha niha gandharvyo ratraya smrita harantyayu parikrantya shashtutara shatatrayam. What was previously explained as Chandavega, powerful time, is covered by days and nights, named Gandharvas and Gandharvis. The body's lifespan is gradually reduced by the passage of days and nights, which number 360. Purport. The word parikrantya means by traveling. The living entity travels on his chariot day and night during a year consisting of 360 or more days and nights. Life's progress is taken for the unnecessary labor required to cover these 360 days and nights of life. Kalakanya jara shaksha lokastamna binandati swasaram jagrihe mrityu kshayaya yavaneshwara. What was described as Kalakanya should be understood as old age. No one wants to accept old age, but Yavaneshwar, Yavanraj, who is death, accepts Jara, old age, as his sister. And we also heard of Yavanraj, Yavaneshwar, he was also described as bhai, right? Fear. So Kalakanya married bhai, fear. Also, death. Purport. Encaged within the body, the living entity accepts Kalakanya, old age, just before death. Yavaneshwar is the emblem of death, Yamaraj. Before going to the place of Yamaraj, the living entity accepts Jara, old age, the sister of Yamaraj. One is subjected to the influence of Yavanraj and his sister due to impious activity. Those who are in Krishna consciousness and are engaged in devotional service under the instructions of Narada Muni are not subjected to the influence of Yamaraj and his sister Jara. If one is Krishna conscious, he conquers death. After leaving the material body, he does not accept another body that is material, but returns home back to Godhead. This is verified by Bhagavad Gita 4.9. And remember, first Jara marries him, and then Yavanraj, by or death, accepts her as his sister. So first they get married, and then they're like sister and brother. That's why Srila Prabhupada says that. Okay. Adhaya vyadayastasya sainika yavanaschara bhuto pasar gashuraya prajvaro divido jara evam bahu vidar dukkar daiva bhutatma sambhavai klishyamana shatam varsham tehe dehi tamovrita pranendriya manodharmam atmanyadhyasya nirguna shete kama lavandhyayan mamaham iti karma krit. Hey. Oh, 1 second. What verse is this? Okay. The followers of Yavaneshwar, Yamaraj, are called the soldiers of death, and they are known as the various types of disturbances that pertain to the body and mind. Prajvara represents the two types of fever, extreme heat and extreme cold, typhoid and pneumonia. The living entity lying down within the body is disturbed by many tribulations pertaining to providence, to other living entities, and to his own body and mind. It's adhyatmika, adhidaivic, and adhibhotik, right? Yeah. Despite all kinds of tribulations, the living entity subjected to the necessities of the body, mind, and senses, and suffering from various types of disease, is carried away by many plans due to his lust to enjoy the world. Although transcendental to this material existence, the living entity, out of ignorance, accepts all these material miseries under the pretext of false egoism, I and mine. In this way, he lives for 100 years within this body. Purport. In the Vedas, it is stated, Asango Yam Purusha. The living entity is actually separate from material existence, for the soul is not material. In Bhagavad Gita, it is also said that the living entity is the superior energy, and the material elements, earth, water, fire, air, and so on, are the inferior energy. The material elements are also described as bhinna, or separated energy. When the internal or superior energy comes in contact with the external energy, it is subjected to so many tribulations. In Bhagavad Gita 2.14, the Lord also says, Matra sparshastu kunteya sitoshna sukha dukkada. Because of the material body, the living entity is subjected to many tribulations brought about by air, water, fire, extreme heat, extreme cold, sunshine, excessive eating, unhealthy food, maladjustments of the three elements of the body, kapha, pitta, and vayu, and so on. The intestines, the throat, the brain, and the other parts of the body are affected by all kinds of diseases that are so powerful that they become sources of extreme suffering for the living entity. The living entity, however, is different from all these material elements. The two types of fever described in this verse can be explained in contemporary language as pneumonia and typhoid. When there is an extreme fever in the body, there is typhoid and pneumonia, and they are described as prajwara. There are also other miseries created by other living entities. The state exacts taxes, and there are also many thieves, rogues, and cheaters. Miseries brought about by other living entities are called adibhotik. There are also miseries in the form of famine, pestilence. What's pestilence mean? Means a fatal epidemic disease, especially bubonic plague. Oh, so could corona be considered pestilence? Okay. There are also miseries in the form of famine, pestilence, scarcity, war, earthquakes, and so on. These are caused by the demigods or other sources beyond our control. Actually, there are many enemies of the living entities, and these are all described to point out how miserable this material existence is. Knowing the basic misery of material existence, one should be induced to get out of the material clutches and return home back to Godhead. Actually, the living entity is not at all happy in this material body. Because of the body, he suffers thirst and hunger and is influenced by the mind, by words, by anger, by the belly, by the genitals, by the rectum, and so on. Manifold miseries encircle the transcendental living entity simply because he desires to satisfy his senses in this material world. If he simply withdraws from activities of sense gratification and applies his senses in the service of the Lord, all the problems of material existence will immediately diminish, and with the advancement of Krishna consciousness, he will be freed from all tribulation, and, after giving up the body, will return home back to Godhead. There's a line missing, but let's see if it's... Okay, there's the lines here. Yadatmanam avigyaya bhagavantam param gurum purushastu vishajeta guneshu prakrite swadrik gunabhimani satada karmani kurute vasha shuklam krishnam lohitam va yata karma bijayate. The living entity by nature has minute independence to choose his own good or bad fortune. Okay. But when he forgets his Supreme Master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he gives himself up onto the modes of material nature. What's Pradyumna saying? Anyways, let me just finish this. Being influenced by the modes of material nature, he identifies himself with the body and, for the interest of the body, becomes attached to various activities. Sometimes he is under the influence of the mode of ignorance, sometimes the mode of passion, and sometimes the mode of goodness. The living entity thus gets different types of bodies under the modes of material nature. Let's see what Prācīnabarhi is saying. Page stuck? Is it still stuck? Oh, and what verse are we reading up to today? 33. Okay. Purport. These different types of bodies are explained in Bhagavad Gita 13:22. Purusha prakritisto hi punkte prakritijan gunan karanam gunasangosya sarasa janmasu. The living entity in material nature follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. Because of associating with the modes of nature, the living entity gets a variety of bodies from the 8,400,000 forms. It is clearly explained herein that the living entity has a little independence, indicated by the word svadrik, meaning one who can see his own welfare. The living entity's constitutional position is very minute, and he can be misled in his choice. He may choose to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A servant may desire to start his own business and imitate his master, and when he chooses to do so, he may leave the protection of the master. Sometimes he is a failure, and sometimes he is successful. Similarly, the living entity, part and parcel of Krishna, starts his own business to compete with the Lord. There are many competitors out to attain the Lord's position, but to become like the Lord is not at all possible. Thus there is a great struggle for existence within the material world as different parties try to imitate the Lord. Material bondage is caused by deviation from the service of the Lord and attempts to imitate him. The Lord is imitated by Mayavadi philosophers who try to become one with the Lord in an artificial way. When the Mayavadi philosophers think of themselves as liberated, they are under the delusion of material concoction. No one can become one with or equal to God. To imagine this is to continue one's bondage in material existence. Shuklat prakasha bhuyishtal lokan apnoti karhichit duko darkan kriyaya sangs tamashokot katan kvachit. Those who are situated in the mode of goodness act piously according to Vedic injunctions. Thus they are elevated to the higher planetary systems where the demigods live. Those who are influenced by the mode of passion engage in various types of productive activities in the planetary systems where human beings live. Similarly, those influenced by the modes of darkness are subjected to various types of misery and live in the animal kingdom. Report. There are 3 planetary systems, upper, middle, and lower. Those influenced by the mode of goodness are given places in the upper planetary systems, Brahmaloka, Tapaloka, Janaloka, and Maharloka. Those influenced by the mode of passion are given places in the Burloka and Bhuvarloka. Those influenced by the mode of ignorance are given places in Atal, Vital, Sutal, Talatal, Mahatal, Rasatal, Patal, or the animal kingdom. Qualitatively, the living entity is the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but because of his forgetfulness, he gets different bodies in different planetary systems. At the present moment, human society is overly influenced by the mode of passion, and consequently, people are engaged in working in big factories. They forget how distressful it is to live in such places. In Bhagavad Gita, such activities are described as ugra karma, that is, distressful activities. Those who utilize the energies of the worker are called capitalists, and those who actually perform the work are called laborers. In actuality, they are both capitalists, and workers are in the mode of passion and ignorance. The result is that there is always a distressful situation. In contrast to these men are those influenced by the mode of goodness, the karmis and jnanis. The karmis, under the direction of Vedic instructions, try to elevate themselves to higher planetary systems. The jnanis try to merge into the existence of Brahman, the impersonal feature of the Lord. In this way, all classes of living entities and various species of life are existing within this material world. This explains superior and inferior life forms within the material world. Kvachit puman kvachit chastri, kvachino bhayamandadhi, deva manushyastri tiryagva, ita karma gunan bhava. Covered by the mode of ignorance and material nature, the living entity is sometimes a male, sometimes a female, sometimes a eunuch, sometimes a human being, sometimes a demigod, sometimes a bird, an animal, and so on. In this way, he is wandering within the material world. His acceptance of different types of bodies is brought about by his activities under the influence of the modes of nature. Purport. Actually, the living entity is part and parcel of the Lord. Therefore, he is spiritual in quality. One second. Okay. Therefore, he is spiritual in quality. The living entity is never material, and his material conception is simply a mistake due to forgetfulness. He is as brilliant as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Both the sun and the sunshine are very brilliant. The Lord is like the full shining sun. What did I say? Did I say shining sun? Oh my god. The Lord is like the full shining sun, and the living entities are like the small particles of that sun which constitute the all-pervasive sunshine. When these small particles are covered by the cloud of Maya, they lose their shining capacity. When the cloud of Maya is gone, the particles again become brilliant and shining. As soon as the living entity is covered by the ignorance of Maya, or darkness, he cannot understand his relationship with the Supreme God. Somehow or other, if he comes before the Lord, he can see himself as shining as the Supreme Lord, although he is not as extensive as the Lord. Because the living entity desires to imitate the Supreme Lord, he is covered by Maya. We cannot imitate the Lord, nor can we become the Supreme Enjoyer. This is not possible, and when we think it is, we become conditioned by Maya. Thus, the engagement of the living entity under the clutches of Maya is brought about by forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord. Under the influence of Maya, the living entity becomes exactly like a person haunted by a ghost. Such a person speaks all kinds of nonsense. When the living entity is covered by the influence of Maya, he becomes a so-called scientist, philosopher, politician, or socialist, and at every moment presents different plans for the benefit of human society. All these plans are ultimately failures, because they are illusory. In this way, the living entity forgets his position as an eternal servant of the Lord. He instead becomes a servant of Maya. In any case, he remains a servant. It is his misfortune that by forgetting his real contact with the Supreme Lord, he becomes a servant of Maya. As a servant of Maya, he sometimes becomes a king, sometimes an ordinary citizen, sometimes a Brahman, a Sudra, and so on. What is it? Kabu Raja, Kabu Praja, Kabu Vipra Shudra. So that is a translation of that verse from Prācīnabarhi. Kabu Sukhi, Kabu, what is it? Anyway, sometimes he is a happy man, sometimes a prosperous man, sometimes a small insect. How does it go? Kabu Sukhi, Kabu something, Kabu Kita Kudra. Sometimes he is in heaven and sometimes he is in hell. Kabu Swarge, Kabu Narake. No, what is it? Kabu Deva, Kabu. God. Anyways, this is all a translation from Prācīnabarhi. It's in Jiva Dharma also. Sometimes he is in heaven and sometimes in hell. Sometimes he is a demigod and sometimes he is a demon. Kabu Dait. Oh God. Sorry, I used to know these. I just forgot it. Sometimes he is a servant and sometimes he is a master. In this way, the living entity wanders all over the universe. Only when he comes in contact with the bona fide spiritual master, he can understand his real constitutional position. He then becomes disgusted with material existence. At that time, in full Krishna consciousness, he regrets his past experiences in material existence. This regret is very beneficial because it purifies the living entity of material conditional life. He then prays to the Lord to engage in his service, and at that time, Krishna grants liberation from the clutches of Maya. Lord Krishna explains this in Bhagavad Gita 7:14. Daiviyesha gunamaye mama maya durattaya mameva ye prapadyante mayam etang tarantite. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome. But those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Only by the grace of Krishna can one get out of the clutches of Maya. It is not possible to get out by mental speculation or other activities. When the living entity understands his real position by the grace of Krishna, he keeps himself always fit in Krishna consciousness and acts accordingly. Thus, he gradually becomes completely free from the clutches of Maya. When he is strong in Krishna consciousness, Maya cannot touch him. In this way, in the association of Krishna-conscious devotees, the living entity can get free from the contamination of material existence. In this connection, Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, Tate Krishna bhaje kore gurur sevan, Maya jala chute pai Krishna racharan. In the Krishna-conscious state, the living entity engages in devotional service under the direction of the spiritual master. In this way, he gets out of the clutches of Maya and takes shelter under the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. It's Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 22:25. Kshutparito yata dina sarameyo griham griham charan vindati adishtam danda odanamevava tata kamashayo jiva uchavacha pata brahman uparyado vamadeva yati dishtam priya priyam. The living entity is exactly like a dog, who, overcome with hunger, goes from door to door for some food. According to his destiny, he sometimes receives punishment and is driven out, and at other times he receives a little food to eat. Similarly, the living entity, being influenced by so many desires, wanders in different species of life according to destiny. Sometimes he is high, and sometimes he is low. Sometimes he goes to the heavenly planets, sometimes to hell, sometimes to the middle planets, and so on. Let me just check the comments. Everything's okay. Okay. Oh. Sorry, I was just reading the comments. Purport. The living entity's position is herein likened to a dog's. By chance, a dog may have a very rich owner, and by chance he may become a street dog. As the dog of a rich man, he will live very opulently. Sometimes in Western countries, we hear of a master leaving millions of dollars to a dog in his will. Of course, there are many dogs loitering in the street without food. Therefore, to liken the conditional existence of the living entity to that of a dog is very appropriate. An intelligent human being, however, can understand that if he has to live the life of a dog, he best become Krishna's dog. Sukeralagia. What is it? Eghara Bandhu. No, sorry, that was the wrong song. I meant, how does it go? Sarvasa Tomar, Charane Sampiya. In the material world, a dog is sometimes elevated and is sometimes on the street. But in the spiritual world, Krishna's dog is perpetually, eternally happy. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has therefore sung, Vaishnava Thakur, Tomar Kukur, Bolia Janaho More. That's so cool, Srila Prabhupada made it Vaishnava Thakur, because usually it's Tumi to Thakur, Tomara Kukur, Bolia Janaho More. But yeah, Srila Prabhupada made it Vaishnava Thakur. In this way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur offers to become a Vaishnava's dog. A dog always keeps himself at his master's door and does not allow any person to
The dog doesn't allow any person unfavorable to the master to enter. Similarly, one should engage in the service of a Vaishnava and try to please him in every respect. Unless one does so, he does not make spiritual advancement. Apart from spiritual advancement, in the material world, if one does not develop his qualities in goodness, he cannot be promoted to the higher planetary system, as confirmed by Bhagavad Gita 14:18. Urdvam gachanti sattvasta madhye tishtanti rajasa jaganya gunavrittista adho gachanti tamasa. Those situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. There are many varieties of life in the different planetary systems, and these come about due to the living entities developing his qualities in goodness, passion, and ignorance. If one is in goodness, he is promoted to the higher systems. If in passion, he remains in the middle systems, and if ignorance, I'm having a hard time reading. And if in ignorance, he is pushed down to the lower species of life. Dukeshvekatarenapi daiva bhutatma hetushu jivasya navyavachedha syatchetat pratikriya. The living entities are trying to counteract different miserable conditions pertaining to providence, other living entities, or the body and mind. Still, they must remain conditioned by the laws of nature, despite all attempts to counter these laws. Purport. Just as a dog wanders here and there for a piece of bread or punishment, the living entity perpetually wanders about trying to be happy and planning in so many ways to counteract material misery. This is called the struggle for existence. We can actually see in our daily lives how we are forced to make plans to drive away miserable conditions. To get rid of one miserable condition, we have to put ourselves in another kind of miserable condition. A poor man suffers for want of money, but if he wants to become rich, he has to struggle in so many ways. Actually, that is not a valid counteracting process, but a snare of the illusory energy. If one does not endeavor to counteract his situation, but is satisfied with his position, knowing that he has obtained his position through past activities, he can instead engage his energy to develop Krishna consciousness. This is recommended in all Vedic literature. Tasaiva heto prayate tako vido nalabhyate yad brahmatam uparyada talabhyate dukkavar anyata sukam kalena sarvatra gabhiraranghasa. Persons who are actually intelligent and philosophically inclined should endeavor only for that purposeful end which is not obtainable even by wandering from the topmost planet, Brahmaloka, down to the lowest planet, Patal. As far as happiness derived from sense enjoyment is concerned, it can be obtained automatically in course of time, just as in course of time we obtain miseries even though we do not desire them. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 1.5.18. One should simply try to develop his Krishna consciousness and not waste his time trying to improve his material condition. Actually, the material condition cannot be improved. The process of improvement means accepting another miserable condition. However, if we endeavor to improve our Krishna consciousness, the distresses of material life will disappear without extraneous endeavor. Krishna therefore promises, Konteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. O son of Kunti, declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. Bhagavad Gita 9:31. One who takes to the path of devotional service will never be vanquished, despite all miseries of the body and mind, and despite all misery brought about by other living entities and providence. miseries which are beyond our control. Okay, we're ending with this verse here. Yatahi purusho bharam shirasa gurumudvaham tam skandena sa'adate tatta sarva pratikriya. A man may carry a burden on his head, and when he feels it to be too heavy, he sometimes gives relief to his head by putting the burden on his shoulder. In this way, he tries to relieve himself of the burden. However, whatever process he devises to counteract the burden does nothing more than to put the same burden from one place to another. This is a good description of an attempt to transfer a burden from one place to another. When one gets tired of keeping a burden on his head, he will place it on his shoulder. This does not mean that he has become freed from the strains of carrying the burden. Similarly, the human society in the name of civilization is creating one kind of trouble to avoid another kind of trouble. In contemporary civilization, we see that there are many automobiles manufactured to carry us swiftly from one place to another. But at the same time, we have created other problems. We have to construct so many roads, and yet these roads are insufficient to cope with automobile congestion and traffic jams. There are also the problems of air pollution and fuel shortage. The conclusion is that the processes we manufacture to counteract or minimize our distresses do not actually put an end to our pains. It is all simply illusion. We simply place the burden from the head to the shoulder. The only real way we can minimize our problems is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and give ourselves up to His protection. The Lord, being all-powerful, can make arrangements to mitigate our painful life and material existence. So that is our reading for today. Just checking the comments. Oh, Prajumna Prabhu found the shloka. Kabu Raja, Kabu Praja, Kabu Vipar Shudra, Kabu Duki, Kabu Suki, Kabu Kita Kudra. Kabu Raja, Kabu Praja, Kiva Vipra Kabu Shudra Kabu, Kabu Duki, Kabu Suki, Kabu Ki... Oh, anyhow. Whatever. Shri Krishna also has 2 pet dogs. Vyagra and Brahmaraka. There was a very well-behaved dog in Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat in the 80s who guarded it when it was a lot less dense there. One day he suddenly broke all the rules and ran up to Srila Sridhar Maharaj's balcony. When the brahmacharis found him, he bowed in front of Maharaj like Dandavat. Then he went downstairs and died. Wow! That is an amazing story. Okay. Yes, the gopis do the opposite. They carry. There's a Gaudiya Math book called Milo the Dog. That's interesting. Yes, and the gopis do the opposites. They steadily carry pots on their head in perfect balance and think of Krishna. Exactly. Very beautiful example. All right. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, oh Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol. So tomorrow we will read Nārada gives bhakti as a solution. No remedy by material means. The only remedy is to surrender unto Krishna. And then Nārada ends Prācīnabarhi's performance of rituals. And then the day after that, Nārada ends Prācīnabarhi's performance of rituals. Pleasing the Lord is the supreme activity. The deer allegory. Further questions by Prācīnabarhi. And then the transmigration of the soul. All right. And we only have like a bit over a week, and then we're finished with the 4th canto. And then we've reached the halfway point in our Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam reading. Jai Shishi Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shishi Radha Vinod Vihari Ju Ki Jai. Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shala Bhaktivedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Shri Gurudev Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shala Bhaktivedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Brigyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Mahabhagavat Srila Gokshwaras Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Nitil Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Patadasha Gunath Shara Gosai Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaura Mandal Vraja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Sarva Abhishta Pradapta Giriraj Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Radha Kunda Shama Kund Ki Jai. Shri Mona Devi Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Purnamasti Yogamaya Ki Jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shinitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Vrindai Tulsi Devai Priyai Keshavashaja. Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi Sattvatai Namo Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyai Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat Pranams. Oh, and Rup Manjari is saying, wait, what? I'm only reading till Canto 8. No, I'm sorry, I should have made it more clear. I'm reading the full thing. I'm going to read to the very end, till the 12th canto. But I have a Kindle book with Srila Prabhupada's purports. It might just be up to Canto 10, Chapter 13, actually. I have to check. But on that Kindle book, it says that once we get to... I checked at the end of Canto 4, we're 50% done with Srila Prabhupada's purports, at least. And then we'll continue from that point on, from Srila Prabhupada's purports, we'll continue on with the Sa Artha Darshini by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that commentary. But yeah, we're almost halfway reading through Srila Prabhupada's purports. Prajuna Bru is asking, is Ravan the major founder of Mayavad? Yeah, read this book by my Param Gurudev called Vaishnava Vijay. I think they did it in English. They named it Beyond Nirvana. But if you see that book, it explains the whole history very clearly. I haven't read it myself, actually. But Anita told me that it was such a fun book to read. You wouldn't think that a book on Mayavad is like a page turner, but she said that she couldn't put it down until she got to the very end. She said it was very entertaining. Yeah, very fascinating history. And yes, I did start at Canto 1. Actually, we started Canto 1 on July 1st, which was the beginning of Chaturmasa last year. So, right now it's June 16th, so in 2 weeks we will have read every day for a year. That's pretty cool, huh? And then it will be another year until we're finished. I stopped for a short time though. Did I stop doing Kartik? No, I read throughout Kartik. I stopped for like, I don't know how long I stopped for, maybe a week or something like that, before the Gaudiya Kirtan app was coming out because we had to do a marathon. And I also stopped for the few days of Navadvip Parikrama. But other than that, I don't think I ever stopped. It's been every single day, never missed a day. Alright, I'm going to end the video now. Oh, was it only on Facebook for a while? No, it was on Facebook every day. Yeah, it was on Facebook every day. Oh, that day happened to be your birthday. Oh, that's really neat. So your birthday is July 1st. Cool. I don't know who this is because it just says Facebook user. Oh, and Bhavatarani Mataji is saying that she read Beyond Nirvana a long time ago, and Gurudev saw it at our house and asked if I had read it. Cool. We need to make a new version of that book, actually. Oh yeah. No, at that time, Rup Manjari Didi, I didn't have Restream. I got Restream, so I did 4 months, because there was Purushottam that month. So I did 4 months just on YouTube. Sorry, not on YouTube, on Facebook Live. And then that Kartik, I got Restream. And then I did it. And then I started streaming it everywhere. Okay, and then Bhavatarini Mataji said to Gurudev, I said yes, and he said, very good. It was Vaishnav Vijay, and it was pink. Yeah, it was the original one. And actually, that book, Beyond Nirvana, that we need to redo that book, because it's beautiful English. It was beautifully written, but it's not so close to the original Bengali. I think the editors at that time took very big liberties to try to make it very gripping. But now we need to go over the book again, Beyond Nirvana, and make it a little bit more close to the original. That's a really big job, but that's one of the things on GBP's plate. But yeah. I want to read it though, because I've heard about it so many times. I've heard how good it is, like how it's not actually a boring book, but I just haven't ever gotten around to it. All right, Dandavat Pranams everybody. Hari Bol.